David asks, thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison podcast. Really appreciate you being here today.
Man, I'm glad to be here. Let's dive in, have a fun conversation here.
Well, I already had one before that we went live.
That's right.
Yeah, I like to help people anyway. Like everybody's telling me, you should do a course on podcasting and radio. You've been doing it for so long. And it's one extra thing I need to do, but they're right. And so if you need help on setting up what you're trying to do, let me know. Because everybody buys the wrong mic up first. Everybody, they get that, what's that round one that sits, they get the big piece on it.
I know what you're talking about.
The Yeti.
Yeah, right.
Reminds me of my coolers, the Yeti or the drink coat. Yeah. It's like the word. It's because these are dynamic, where it means that, and everybody's listening, you can get a quick little thing on this. That means the sound comes through here only, not over here. If my dog was in here barking, you wouldn't hear him necessarily unless he's super loud.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. But those Yetis are condenser, where they pull up all the noise in the room.
Wow.
And it's not just them. It's just everybody sees it and thinks, that's a cool looking mic. That's what I need for my podcast. Yeah, it goes good on the shelf, but you don't need to talk to it.
Yeah. Right.
So that's important when you're starting all this stuff and doing the lives and everything you're trying to do. It's just a matter of, like, if you start a podcast, figure out who your audience is. That's what's the most important. Who is that person? What's that one person you're trying to get to? Because when you're talking on a podcast and when you're doing this, you're speaking to one person.
Yeah.
And so you always want to speak to that person that you are and why we do this. Because once I was on the radio show years ago, and I said, listeners, and my producer yelled at, you don't call them listeners. Because when you call them listeners, they're talking to somebody else. But when you say you, then they think you're talking to them. And that's what's so important. Because we are on the show. That's where we're here for you. And we're here for you to understand what we're talking about. So David asked, you took a mousetrap and made it better, is what you did. But before we get into that, what's your background?
Yeah. So who are you talking to here? So I actually grew up in a little town in Minnesota called Glenwood. It's a wonderful place to live. Little town with one stoplight. I moved to Nashville, Tennessee.
Is that where Wayne's World was?
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe.
I'm just. They had kind of the same thing, small town Minnesota.
Yeah. When you think of my hometown, you actually think more of grumpy old men, like Wabasha, Wisconsin, a bunch of Scandinavians, and everybody's real friendly and, just kind of bopping around doing their thing. And anyway, just an awesome place. But I moved to Nashville and to go to college, and ended up like feeling home right away. So I've been here for almost 30 years. It's been crazy. Of course, met a girl who grew up here and, got married. We've got 2 teenagers, and I've got a few different irons in the fire. So I of course, run a business, like you said, based on a better mousetrap situation, and do some coaching, run a couple of mastermind groups within the ISI mastermind. And I still do a little bit of music, and
what's ISI?
So ISI was started by Aaron Walker. It's called Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. And there's about, I think it's 160 men from 5 or 6 different countries that are part of ISI. And I liken it like this. Some people, when they hear the term mastermind, they're like, oh gosh, what's this? Some kind of a cult or something?
No, masterminds are really important.
Yeah. So basically, you've got a band of brothers for your personal life and a board of directors for your business. And so we really, we talk about, all the areas of life. And, because if you're successful at work, but you're not at home, you're not really successful, and vice versa, really. And so we just help each other win and stay in the middle of the road and overcome obstacles and things like that. And it's been 6 years in ISI, and it's been absolutely life-changing.
Well, I'll have to look into it.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for anything outside my industry.
Yeah.
Because I tell people, it's like you don't want to, you learn everything about your industry. That you don't need to keep going to the same industry events. You need to go outside to figure out what you can bring into your industry that's different.
Yeah.
And you can change that.
Yeah.
And so you told before the show you worked for Verizon.
I did. I was there about 17 years. And it was actually really great experience.
Well, it's how you developed your thing, right?
Well, so actually, long story short, not really. So
So how,
that
yeah. So how did you, there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about, but since I keep reading the name on the thing there,
yeah.
StatGuardPlus.com.
Yep. So I was working at Verizon. My brother-in-law was in South Florida working for banks that own foreclosed properties. And they would get the properties back up for sale. And then, of course, the real estate agents would come in and show the properties. And, it's July in Miami and they want that property nice and cold when they're showing it. But, of course, the banks didn't want to pay those high energy bills. So they started putting thermostat guards over the thermostats, but nobody could keep track of that little key. So he called me one day and he said, hey, David, where do I get a stat guard with a combo lock? And so this was 10 years ago. And long story short, there, we went into business together. And I came up with the name StatGuard Plus. We trademarked that and started the patent process and all that kind of thing. And then I ended up buying him out a few years after that. So, I run it, by myself now. But we've been really fortunate. It's been, as any entrepreneur can tell you, the path is never straight. And almost seems like a pipe dream to be, in Home Depot, Lowe's, and now True Value just as a month ago. And just thrilled, like really thrilled to have traction and be growing. And, we just about didn't make it through COVID, and there's been all kinds of, obstacles like anybody in business, right? But grateful.
Yeah. I'm living through the 5% increase in interest rates. So
Right. Yeah.
we have our end now that only 35% of the existing home sales come on the market, and we're not building any homes in California. So I can tell you about challenges of business that we didn't plan. I knew things would change, but we shouldn't have been this bad.
Right.
But now so you patented it, you have the technology. Have you thought about licensing the technology to anybody else?
Well, so actually, you might imagine, I've got a great job, but when Home Depot says we'd like to put your product on our shelves, right? Well, that presents a really big obstacle because
Yeah, manufacturer.
well, yeah, I didn't know how to do any of that. We were selling online and this and that, but I didn't have the capital to stock the shelves one time, let alone, you know, uh, keep 20,000 units sitting around, right? So I ended up licensing it to a company, and they've been a great partner for over 7 years now. And so we're actually in the process of developing different variations on that. We just came out with a new one called the Lockbox Pro, and that's for the Pro channel. It has a combination lock with a key, and that's we're going to kind of keep that for like contractors and things like that. But it's they've actually been a really fantastic partner.
How did you find somebody to license your product through?
It was actually a tip by the merchant at Home Depot. So when it was funny, by the way. I'm sitting on the tarmac in Nashville, getting ready to fly to go do a concert, and I get the call. So I'm like, we're sitting there. So I'm like, this is David, and he just basically, the call is really short. He just says, "Hey, we'd like to do this," and his only question is, "Can you do this?" So like, Richard Branson for, Virgin Mobile, I lied and said yes. And just like anybody else, you figure it out, right?
Right.
Well, I go do my concert, come back, blah, blah,
Okay, back up
blah.
a second before we finish this
Yeah.
concert. You say you do music. So what kind of concert were you doing? Were you going to a concert, or were you playing in the concert?
I'm actually a vocalist. So I was a vocal major at Belmont University, and I've cut 3 records. I've sung on stages all over the country. In fact, places I signed non-disclosure agreements, so I can't even talk about them. But I've sung on symphony stages, and yeah, my music is on iTunes. I do it for fun. I've never done music for a living, but I'm really grateful
You had
to
to do a non-disclosure for singing somewhere.
believe it or not.
Just
Yes,
a yes or no.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of
Wow.
funny how many. It was a private golf club, and they're incredibly private. That's all there is to it. So, um,
So they didn't
yeah,
want you to say where it was, who they were, and who was there,
right,
basically. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, it's honestly, when I do some interviews like this, my life is a little bit weird.
No.
At the same time, I like variety. I always have. I've always felt like a little bit of an outsider. By the way, until I found, my entrepreneur buddies in ISI. I felt like I found my people finally, because most of the people I hung out with my whole life, focused on one thing and did it really well. And I kind of like this idea of, and again, I don't like the phrase mile wide, inch deep, but here's the fascinating thing is years ago, I read that book, Who Not How. And if you surround yourself with the right who's, you don't have to know how to do everything, right? And so I'm able to, scale a few different things and get the right teams together to help me do that, where I can stay in my seat on the bus in more of a creative capacity.
No, I've been talking to, because I in the real estate industry and different things. I'm talking to people about multiple streams of income. I think that's the kind of what they say now instead of the mile wide, inch deep kind of. I get
Right.
that what you
Yeah.
just said, but just saying multiple streams of income, people
Yeah.
are okay. They don't
Yeah.
question anymore.
Right.
And ever since COVID, has it not? It's become majorly. And I talked to a dentist, a periodontist. They're, the exclusive. That means I do oral surgery and I charge a lot. They're
Yeah.
not the dentist. It had to be clarified from him today about that. And he was talking about how he was in a skiing accident, and then he's like, I couldn't work. And at
Mm,
that point, that I learned that I needed to have other forms of income so that if something happened to me, or if I'm just burnt out, I don't have to work. And
yeah.
that's what he's been buying. I won't get into it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
mobile home parks and
Sure.
RV park, all that stuff. And so,
Yep.
but it's
Yep.
about multiple streams of income.
It really is. And I'll be honest, through COVID, I felt like I had my eggs in one basket. And since then, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing a little bit of real estate investing, and got a couple other products that I'm working on. We're kind of branching out, and it kind of gives you a bit of peace.
Yeah, well, it's about, and then the real estate, like, there's so many different ways of doing it now versus buying
Right.
just a single family home and having to deal with all that.
Yeah.
There's, syndications, everything. And but I explained to people prior to 2008, or, that downturn, people got into huge. I remember these huge syndications doing mansions all over the world to go to, and they took it in the shorts because of the fact that 2008 happened, and so many people got sued from it that a lot of us who's been in the industry for a very long time or are older have shied away from it, which at our detriment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. All right, back to your story. So there, before you're going to go to your concert, you were
Yeah.
talking.
So it was one of those things where he's like, "Can you do this?" And of course, I'm like, Yeah, no problem." Act real confident. And of course, all weekend I'm thinking, "How in the heck am I going to pull this off?" And he ended up calling me back, and he just said, "Hey, I didn't know if you wanted, um, some other options here," but he just said, we've got some partners within our organization that might be able to, fill in some gaps for you." He didn't even mention the whole licensing thing. And but I started kind of digging a bit deeper and had some meetings, and it ended up being just a great fit. And it allowed me to stay in my lane, right? Because I didn't. It's a funny thing, right? You think the old school thinking is well, I'm just going to build a business and learn how to do it. And it means, so you're really going to learn how to do it. You're going to learn how to do supply chain management, shipping, distribution. That is a business in and all of itself. Let alone you start doing, business with a big box, learning the ins and outs of how they do merchandising and returns and just all the language and all that kind of stuff, let alone marketing, on the outside, driving traffic to those stores, right? Though that real estate is expensive. I'm honored to be there. And I knew full well my time would be much better spent driving traffic there. So
Right.
it was such a great partnership.
Good. Uh, and how long did it take you? Because I've seen Shark Tank. That's where people go with things that you have, and we need a partner to get this going. But some licensing deals are even better than the money and everything else. It just depends on what that number is.
Yeah.
Right. How did you come up with did they come with the first offer? Did you have an idea? How did you figure out that kind of licensing numbers?
Yeah. So, again, it was, I was surrounded by guys who'd just been there, done that.
Through
It,
the ISI?
yeah. And in fact, I don't know if you know who Dan Miller is. He just passed away, about a month ago, but he's the guy that wrote 48 Days to the Work You Love and No More Mondays, and just a wonderful career coach. And if you go to 48days.com, that's his platform, but he had hundreds of thousands of followers, sold several million books. And I ended up meeting him at a music event. We were singing in a choir here in Nashville, and I had seen him on Fox News and CNN and heard him on the radio. And all of a sudden, I hear his voice behind me, and I'm turning around. I'm like, "Are you Dan Miller, like the guy on TV?" And oh yeah, and so we ended up hitting it off, right? So we knew each other a few years. And when this opportunity came up, I not only had my ISI group, but I called Dan and I'm like, "Hey, I've never navigated these waters. Can you give me some advice?" And it was kind of neat because he uh, it was kind of nice. He confirmed what I was thinking, but at the same time, he spelled it out in such a way that just made so much sense, kind of breaking down the numbers and what he thought retail would want, what these guys would need to cover their costs, make it worth their while. And he asked me a lot of great questions so I could come to my own conclusion, as it were, right? As a good coach. And but yeah, it just was a really, worked out great. So
Good. No, because I really recommend that people have a cornerman, coach, master, and all that stuff in your place, mentor, because you need it. Because
yeah,
I saw this the other day. Oh, it was on Blue Bloods of all places.
yeah.
But you had the commissioner and you had the mayor, and they were talking about how it's lonely at the top. And as business owners, you are lonely at the top unless you're around other business owners.
Man, yeah, you got that right. I remember when I sat down with Aaron Walker to, just to hear more about ISI, we were he looked at me and he goes, David, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm like, I'm in. And because that scared me. Like, well, there's an understatement. And I know I'm what is that phrase? I'm dumb enough to know I shouldn't be here, like trying, swinging for the fence on some level. But man, I'm smart enough to know that I'm kind of dumb, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. But guess what? I don't have to, right? Just ask great questions. People love to help, by the way. That's
Mhm.
another thing. Quite often we limit ourselves because we think, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be humble. And boy, you just go over and ask someone to say, here's what I'm doing. What would you do? They love to help. In general, most people are really generous with their time and, their experience.
No, and it's just us limiting. Like I'm a vet, so our biggest problem is we don't like asking for help.
Hmm.
Once you get out, which is the dumbest thing, once you get out, because once you're in, like I always tell, because I do a podcast after on Wednesdays called Helping the Brave. And when I deal with a lot of the veterans that I on there, they always say, it's hard to ask for help. And with PTSD, I'm like, but you ask for,
Yeah.
if you're being shot at and you ask for, you know, air support, what's the difference?
Yeah.
So,
Hey,
and
what branch were you in and
I
how
was in
long?
the Navy. I was a
How
corpsman in the
many,
Navy. I
how
was
many years?
stationed 5 years, 5 months, and 14 days, but who was counting?
Yeah,
I was stationed at Camp Pendleton with the Marines, so
man,
they're
that's
my peeps.
awesome.
Yeah,
Much respect there, by the way.
thank
Thank
you.
you for serving. That's awesome.
Thank you. I usually have a flag behind me, but not for Inner Edison anymore. That's for all the other stuff. I just thought it was too, a lot of people like it, but I
And by
wanted
the
to have.
way, you and I talked about some of the names for your different endeavors and so on, but the name of this is what caught me. Inner Edison. I just thought, what a great name. You're
Thank my wife for that one.
Well, it's genius. It's really cool.
Yeah, because it's all about what our greatest accomplishments come from our greatest mistakes, basically, or defeats,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them. But
Yeah.
we have to, and I want people to talk about. You have to make mistakes. So, since you brought it up, what was one of the mistakes you made along the way?
You know, it kind of ties back to this whole thing of surrounding yourself with people. Is I had old thinking, and I thought, well, I mean, be a man and figure it out. Well, how about be a man and ask for help? Like, be humble. So I spent a lot of years just kind of wasting time trying to sit in the wrong seat on the bus, thinking I had to for some stupid reason. And I think that largely is what, caused kind of a delay, if you will, in succeeding and, causing my business to go from a hobby to, a business. And even now, I mean, I do work in the business, but largely work on it. And I've got some margin to do stuff like this, right? And I love to talk about, help other people, grow ideas. My company is Quorum Global. If you go to Quorum, Chorum global.com, we do product development. And sometimes we get paid to do that, right? At the same time, I really like creativity. And if somebody comes to me and, has an idea about something, I'll spend 30 minutes or an hour just, you know, beating it up a little bit and asking questions. And it just gives me a lot of joy to do that. So I probably do that a couple hours a week.
Have you found that there's a lot of people want to create stuff that they just again don't know what to do, just like you did?
Yeah, I had a guy call me today. I've known him for a couple of years. We go to church together, and he goes, David, I've had like 7 ideas that I've never acted on, and sure enough, somebody else did. And he goes, so he came to me with another idea. He's really into coffee, and I guess I won't give away the secret here, but he's got a really cool coffee invention, so we beat that up today. And I actually called my friend who does CAD design, and we, made some renderings and this and that. And I just, I love that process. And by the way, I think more than that, when I was trying to develop, my products, I had people come alongside me and help, and it meant the world. So I'm just trying to, pay it forward, as it were.
Well, I think today it's like now we're talking. You're in Tennessee and I'm in California. We're talking on doing this podcast, and it's
Yeah.
also video and everything else, which a few years ago you couldn't do.
Oh,
Right.
right.
Right. Podcasts have come a long ways and ever since the pandemic, they put so much money into this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That is, I think because of that, it leaped it forward so much faster than it was coming. And
Unbelievable.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I try to explain to people, I have another talk I do. It's called the 1023 of podcasting. It's all right. So the 1023, it's really the rule of podcasting, 1023 rule of podcasting. And basically, most people don't get past the first 10 episodes. They find
Okay.
out it's so much time.
Okay.
Not only the 30 minutes that you do it, then you have to edit it, then you have to cut it up, then you have to do this, you have to make shorts, you have to do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And if you have somebody else do it, it could be $250 an
Right.
episode. There are other ways, and I that because I've came
Sure.
across and interviewed. He'll be coming in a few other episodes called Video Scale, and they do unlimited video editing, including thumbnails and everything else for $900 to $1,200 a month, which is.
Wow.
But let me caveat that. I said, okay, great. Here's all my stuff that I want to do. I'm sorry, that'll be 2 accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not technically unlimited. It's,
Right.
it's what people can handle. But
Sure. Sure.
and so that's the 10. The 23 is that's when the next level of people who stop. If you get past the 23rd, you're pretty much going to be going on. And then after that, if you stop it, it's because something else happened in your life from that podcast, or something happened to you. But most people, that's the big thing's 10. If you
Yeah.
look at, there's so many out there have 1 to 10 episodes, like
Right.
80% of them, and
Yeah.
then you go to the next 10% at the 23 level. So
Interesting. That's
yeah.
insightful.
I actually made that up. I mean, the 1023, but because I saw these, I deal with numbers in my head, and I deal with numbers all the time, and I
Yeah.
can come up with things, and it's usually almost 100% accurate. And I say almost because it could be 99. And
Well,
it
it,
was
it
like,
kind of rings true, though. I think it's, but I think
I
you're right.
know for a fact the 10, because I
Yeah.
researched it years ago, before I came over that talk and saw that, that's what I saw. And
Yeah.
so it's so important. That's why people go, you need to talk about this. Yeah, I have so much I need to talk about.
Well, it's amazing too. I'll do a few of these a week, and it's amazing how many people have got 300 episodes. They're really just going strong and
Mhm.
really passionate about what they're doing and serving their audience, and it's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, see, I had 2.5 years into it, and then I stopped it for about 6 months, which hurt my algorithms. But
Yeah.
I just got to a point where I couldn't get people to talk about. In the beginning, they did, but then people just wanted to be on because I had so many. I've had major people on,
Sure.
and in the beginning, and then people wanted to come on, and then they wouldn't talk about their failures, which is the most important thing.
Mm.
How do you fix it so people don't have these failures?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have them, or how do you limit the impact?
Yeah.
And then also talk about your failures so people understand that. And so I took a break for 6 months going, okay, do I really want to continue on because of this? And I just said, okay, enough is enough. I'm coming back. And that's my opener on each one, says I'm back, and I haven't taken it off just because I like it, to let people know why you might not see the downloads. I'm in the top still 1% of all podcasts in the world.
That's amazing. Way to
Yeah.
go. Very
Yeah,
cool. By
but
the way, you mentioned, mistakes and so on. I'll just get a bit more vulnerable here too. Is, you know what? Who's really, kind of the biggest obstacle, if you will, or what is? It's ourselves. And sometimes, right, it's information we need, and we need some support, that kind of stuff. But quite often it's self-awareness. When we get up in the morning with a vague sense of, our convictions and strengths and, values and that kind of stuff, we're going to experience that kind of generic sense of mission, generic sense of leaning in, generic sense of courage. So one of the things that I've done lately, I work really closely with Dr. Andy Garrett, a friend of mine who's a clinical psychologist. I went through his True North blueprint, and it just helps you get really, really clear on who you are. And man, that has been life changing, not only as a husband and father, but as a business owner, as a human. And because you kind of remove that stupid question mark, and you understand what motivates you, what lights you up, what gives you goosebumps, what is it that you're, that word passion, right, comes from the word suffer. What are you willing to suffer for? Like what pisses you off, and what are you willing to fall on your sword over, or what fire do you want to put out? And by the way, here's something else, and this is more true to my nature. I don't want to put out freaking fires all day, right? I want to start fires. I want to, when people call me or I interact with them, I want them to, you know, straighten their spine a little bit and be like, holy crap, that was a great interaction with David. And I feel like I'm more capable here. Why was that? And it's because I'm not, showing up with this vague idea of who's showing up here. I'm on mission to make that person's life better and put more wind in their sail than they ever thought possible, because that's who I am. I've identified that about me. And that's another thing. I spent years just struggling with deep insecurity.
And that's different for everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
because we all, and the reason I bring that up, because I went in the military. Most people who go in the military, we have, issues from our childhood. That's why we go in and run towards danger, not away from danger. And you have to deal with that stuff. And that's why I help vets a lot. And we're putting on a fire walk for veterans on the 12th and 13th of April here in Modesto, California. We'll do about 450 of them, 2-day event,
That's
help
awesome.
them walk across and deal with their stuff. And,
Yeah.
we also do first responders. So there's actually 4 groups we're going to help at first. Veterans first, then first responders, and then we'll go from there down the road.
That's awesome.
But it's about giving back, because as much as I complain about what happened in my industry, it really hurt me again. And to a point where if it wouldn't have, I would have continued on doing what I was doing and not looking for additional streams of income. Right.
Yeah.
I would keep going, swapping my time for money, all that stuff, even though I'm in sales, because that's what I do. And I had a huge team. I worked, but I had a lot of assistants to help me, but I had to go back through all my systems, all the stuff that I was doing to see what was really important. Yeah. I'm going to come out of this stronger, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I'm just saying, but I'm also going to, it's going to take a little bit more time to fix everything that's happened because of this, but that's okay. That's a learning phase.
Yeah. And here's something else too is, part of, my childhood and upper Midwest kind of sensibilities was, we didn't talk so much about just really thriving and just kicking butt. It was more, do things that are practical, and, you got to save a certain amount and have an emergency fund, and just, I'm not going to say survival mode, but it was largely, kind of a smaller box to play in. And so one of the things that I learned out of COVID was, okay, multiple revenue streams, but it's not out of this scarcity mindset. And like somehow I got to be protecting something. Well, it kind of goes without saying. Don't, okay, but what about just a more expansive view about what's possible now? Right? Look at Mark Cuban. He's got his hand in like 150 companies. I'm not saying that's me, but at the same time, I like this idea of, I'm going to grow because growth is fun and it's exciting. I'm not going to do it because I'm scared that I'm not going to have food on the table. And there's a big shift there. And I think everybody's got to do that introspection for a few minutes and be like, wait a second, am I doing this out of fear, or am I really excited about bringing the fullest version of who I am to make a difference in this world?
No, I totally agree. And you got to find out who you are. And why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And, I've changed. One of my coaches was saying, Ed, do you know what you do now? I'm like, I have no idea. And he's like, you tell people stories across multiple mediums, mortgage industry, the radio, the podcasting, and the other stuff. And he's like, that's what you do now. He goes, you always did in the mortgage industry, but now you're doing it across everything else. And that's what I really enjoy. So.
But isn't that neat though? It kind of goes back to this idea of, surrounding yourself with people. we don't create that identity on an island. We need people to read our label. We need people, to validate and galvanize those things. And if they see something great, say something. My favorite quote, by the way, is it's getting a little bit touchy feely here, but it's by Benjamin Disraeli. He used to be the former PM of England back in the 1800s. But he said, the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And that's what I think is like that guy just did for you, right? He read your label and said, man, you're a storyteller. You're shining a spotlight on lives here. And you're like, oh, wow. And it's not that you didn't, you weren't doing something valuable. You just hadn't assigned meaning to it. And that's a big deal. There's a big difference. Sometimes we're acting, in an authentic way that's, true to our authenticity, our uniqueness. We just haven't done the deep work to assign meaning to it. Therefore, we're not getting as much joy as we possibly could out of it.
I agree. And it's all about so I can tell other people what I see from them, just like you just said, but somebody has to help you figure out what, because you think, but what do other people see? And we don't know what other people see until they tell us. And it's important to help people. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to help other people because I've been helped in my life, and that's why I help other people. Plus, if you give stuff away for free, people will pay you for
it. By the way, there's a guy I go to church with, or used to, Jack, and he goes, David, in life, there's relationships and crap. Like the entire point of life is relationships. It's people. The rest of it is a context. Whether you're golfing or building a business or whatever it is, it's just where you are, what you're doing. But the entire point is what you said. It's about, it's about helping people. It's about loving people. It's about lifting them up. It's insights. It's putting wind in their sail, whatever that is for you.
Right. And that's what you got to find out, because you don't know why. You got to ask, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Multiple times. You got to ask yourself why 3 times to figure out what that is, just like you do other people to figure out how to help them. Why are they doing it? And because the first time they don't tell you the right answer at first. You have to get through it. It's the same thing psychologists do. The answer's inside of you.
Yeah. And isn't it funny? It sounds kind of woohoo and this kind of thing. But, after hanging out with Dr. Andy, when you go through his course, people think you got to live a bunch of life and figure out who you are. No, you don't. You just have to have somebody ask you the right questions and write the stinking stuff down. That's your identity, right? When you identify authenticity, here's getting real deep. The word authenticity comes from the word author, right? We didn't make us. I didn't choose my eye color. I didn't choose my taste buds. I didn't choose my personality. Those of us who have kids or siblings know that we all come out of the gate really hardwired. So when you just identify those things that are written on your canvas, it gives you a sense of authority in your life, because you remove that question mark. I like this. I don't like this. Or this is what lights me up. This doesn't. This gives me energy. This drains my energy. This makes me cry in a good way, and this makes me want to puke. It's really practical, and we all think we just have to do a bunch of things and discover who we are. No, you don't. You just got to be asked the right questions, write that stuff down, and start operating out of what you've identified. That's your identity. And man, life gets really good at that point. You start removing the question mark for yourself, for your wife, for your kids, and everything else.
And it's also about just doing stuff. I mean, the problem with some of us who are older or where we've been in life, we like, that's not it. And then you got these other people just do it, and you're like, how are they killing it? And because they haven't had somebody tell them they can't do it.
That's true
the
too.
difference. And we're tell ourselves multiple times, we can't, it's not worth it. Don't do that. I mean, it's just like some of the courses that, I'm putting together now that I should have put together years ago, but because of, no one will pay for it. Come to find out, they'll pay for the bare minimum stuff to get going more than they pay for the most important stuff.
Yeah. It's amazing.
All right, David, it was nice having you on the show today. Anything else you want to add before we go?
I do like to just add, I've got a lot of irons on the fire, right? And if somebody, needs some help with something, I don't care what it is, no strings attached, just go to my website, David, it's my last name is ASK, davidask.com. And, let me know, reach out. I'll do my best to help.
You should have swapped that.
Ask David. That's right.
No, because I have asked at Ed Parcaut to ask me questions for my personal website, like you have your David Ask, but it's just you
Yeah.
have that perfect last name. But David, it was nice having you on the show. And especially
too.
the fact that found out that you help people with if they have I don't want to say an invention, but something they've come up with an
Sure.
idea that they want to see if it's worth it, to reach out to you and you can help them on that.
Be great. Yep.
All right, David, thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison Podcast. I really had a nice time talking to you and get to know you today.
You too. Thanks.
All right, make it a great day.